Hey guys, we are going to talk about parts of a sentence. I just want to do a quick review with you really fast to remind you what a sentence is. Remember, it has to have at least 3 requirements. So it has to have a subject to be a sentence, it has to have a verb, and it has to be a complete thought. So once we create a sentence and we're going to break it down, it has multiple pieces to it, and we're going to talk about the different pieces that a sentence can have. And this is going to help you write better sentences as well. So take out your notes and you're going to write down according to this PowerPoint. I'm going to walk you through it. All right, so on your notes, what parts make a sentence? This is number 1 in the blank. So number 1 is a subject. A subject is the first piece that makes a sentence. And we've talked about that. You have to have a subject to have a sentence. If you don't have a subject, it's a fragment. All right, number 2 in your notes is a predicate. This is a fancy word for a verb. Okay, so if you want to write down beside a predicate, you can write verb right here. So you understand that when I say predicate, I mean verb. It's the same exact thing. All right, we're also going to talk about number 3, the direct object. All right, and that is going to be another piece we'll talk about. And number 4 in your notes, indirect object. So the first 4 blanks are the 4 pieces we're going to start talking about today. All right, we're going to move on to the next number 1. So what do we start with when we're trying to find sentence parts? So you're going to start with the verb. So write that down in your notes. Start with the verb. This is going to make it a lot easier to break down your sentence when you're trying to find all the pieces, because it's always going to have a verb and the verb is easier to find. So start by looking for that action word. To find the predicate or the verb, locate an action word. You can also locate a linking verb if you don't have an action word. Go ahead and in the side of your notes, let's go ahead and make a list of our linking verbs. So on the side of your notes, let's label our linking verbs. So linking verbs are, these are important, you need to memorize these. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. So there's 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You need to memorize these so you can identify them in the sentence. So you can look for an action verb, or you can look for a linking verb, or a verb phrase, which is just multiple verbs together. By finding that, you've found your predicate. So number 1, start with the verb. Okay, next, number 2 in your notes. Look for the subject. This is the next blank in your notes. Look for the subject. To find the subject, ask who or what, and that will tell you what the subject is. So we're going to look at an example down here. I gave Mom a bouquet of weeds. All right, find the predicate first. Gave. Okay, that's my verb, so I know it's an action word. It's easy to find. Then I ask myself when I'm looking for the subject, who or what, plus the verb. So who gave? I gave. That's my subject. That's an example. All right, a sentence may have a direct object, indirect object, or both. This is number 3 in your notes. May have a direct object, indirect object, or both. So let's talk about what those are. So to find a direct object, ask the verb plus what. All right, let's look at the example. So I gave is my verb. So what did I give? I gave a bouquet. That becomes my direct object. This is the object that comes after that action verb telling me what I did, what I gave. If I say I took a test, what did I take? I took a test. That's my direct object. It's going to come after your action verb. Okay, you can also have an indirect object. This is also on your notes in number 3. There's no blank for it, but you're looking at it. To find the indirect object, ask the verb to, for whom, or what. Okay, so I gave Mom a bouquet. I gave is my verb. Who did I give a bouquet to? I gave it to Mom. So I'm asking to or for. Who's it for? It's for Mom. That's my indirect object. If you guys will go ahead and make a note about indirect objects. So on the side of your notes, you need to understand that you can only have an indirect object if you have a direct object first. So if you don't have a direct object, you can never have an indirect object. Must have a direct object in order to have an indirect object. All right, so make sure you understand that, because if you are looking for an indirect object and you don't even have a direct object, you're not going to find one. All right, so let's look at this example again. We have gave is the verb. Found that first because it's easiest to find. Who gave? I gave. That's my subject. What did I give? I gave a bouquet. Of weeds is just a prepositional phrase that's describing it. So we can include it, but it's not. This is the core right here. Bouquet is the direct object. Then you have an indirect object. Who did I give the bouquet to? I gave it to Mom. All right, so we should be done with the example. You wrote down P is predicate, so that should be gave in your notes. So beside P in your notes, you should have written gave. Beside S for subject, you should have written I in your notes. Beside DO, you should have written a bouquet of weeds. I like to abbreviate direct object with DO, it's just easier. And beside IO, indirect object, you should have written Mom. All right, so once we kind of understand this basis, we can look at different types of sentences that we're going to create using these different pieces. So we're going to look at what's sentence patterns. Let's look at a few more examples before we go on. All right, so this is the same example, the same sentence we looked up above. This is not in your notes, but just pay attention. So first of all, we want to start with the predicate. So remember, start with the verb, start with the verb, start with the verb. All right, so what's the verb? Tomorrow will be a snow day. Will be is my verb. So when I'm looking for the predicate, I found the action verb, it's will be. Then I ask myself, who or what will be? Tomorrow will be. Tomorrow is my subject. So I've got my subject, my verb. So now I ask myself, what? Tomorrow will be what? It will be a snow day. Okay, so I've got my direct object. I'm good to go. So the last thing I can ask myself is to or for whom? Will be who? Will be for who? Well, that doesn't really have an answer, so that means I don't have an indirect object, and that's okay. I don't have to have one. All right, one more example. At Barnes & Noble, the students bought their teacher a new book. All right, find the verb first. So what happened? What's going on? What's the action? Bought. That's the action. They did something. They bought something. All right, that's my verb. Who bought? Students. They did the buying. That's the subject. Then you have who, what did they buy? Students bought what? Students bought a book. So that becomes my what? You should say direct object. Okay, then who is the book for? Good, the teacher. That is my what? Indirect object. Perfect. All right, now wait, what's this phrase up here? At Barnes & Noble. Okay, this is a prepositional phrase. We don't have to worry about them when we're looking at sentence parts because you're never going to have a subject or a verb or a direct object in a prepositional phrase. That's really important to understand, so let's make a note. You will never have a subject, verb, direct object, or indirect object in a prepositional phrase. Make sure you understand that so it's easier to find these pieces, because if you find those prepositional phrases, you can cross them out and it'll make it easier to find the rest. All right, and we're going to pause there before we look at sentence parts and patterns, and you can watch the next video to find out more.